Hello and welcome to the Permaculture Vine podcast, where we talk about permaculture, projects, and people. I'm your host, Cormac Harkin, and today we have Michael with us. Welcome, Michael.
Yeah, g'day, Cormac. How are you? Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you for taking it up. So we're in a bit of a time zone here. I'm in the morning. You're in the afternoon. You're in Australia.
Oh yeah, it's evening now, so it's what I think it's 7:30 at night, almost 7:45 or something.
Yeah, big time jump. Thanks for jumping on such a late time, Michael. Do you want to just give us a quick introduction, please, first?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, my name is Michael. I'm a permaculture designer, educator, and consultant. I've been professionally in the space for probably about 11 years, maybe 12 years, somewhere along those lines. I've been working on with lots of different clients in that time frame. I was introduced to the idea of permaculture maybe 30 something years ago, I guess. I picked up a copy of Permaculture 1 and the introduction to permaculture in the back of a library that was completely covered in dust, and sort of flicked through it, and it really appealed. But I didn't really do anything with it probably for a large number of years until my children were born. And then all of a sudden it's like, hang on, there's a legacy here. And so started to play with some of the ideas and concepts, and done a few courses. So I've done, I think, 14 different PDCs as a student now. In around lots of different places. That was more so from the influence of some of my original teachers. And they were sort of like, don't just do one, do a few and get different opinions from lots of different people, because everyone's got a different way of looking at it. And that's actually helped shape my worldview with regards to it. Lots of different tools and techniques in the toolbox. And from there, I started venturing into holistic management, biological farming, and natural sequence farming. And it's just sort of, I became a sponge, and so it sort of really expanded out into lots of different spaces. But it's interesting to note that while they're all independent, they're all synergistic as well. So there's a lot of crossover in what I do from the different methodologies. When I go out to sites now, it's not purely one thing or another. It's a bit of a blend, which I find is working very, very well.
Just great stuff. 14 PDCs.
Yeah. Listen, it was nuts. I mean, it was my originally it was like, do at least 3 different PDCs with 3 different teachers, do a teacher trainer and at least one advanced course, and go get some practical experience with this stuff. And so I took that on board. And like I said, it was something like 14 PDCs and 4 teacher trainers and 8 advanced different courses. And I just didn't stop. I couldn't help it.
We'll definitely get back to all that, because I'm interested to see the comparison. Because I always ask people, how did you do your PDC, and I'm trying to piece together the different bits. So it'll be interesting to hear your take. But do you want to go back to your start? You said it was the designer's manual,
introduction to permaculture, and Permaculture 1.
Do you want to tell us about that, how you first discovered it, and then?
Yeah, it was just after high school, and sort of I was wandering around the library. This is back before all the internet was the big thing now, and it was all readily available at our fingertips. And I was just wandering through, and I found this section in the back that was, not particularly well looked after, and there's a bit of dust, as you do. And sort of, I was flicking through, and I found some books, and there was this word permaculture. I'm like, what the hell is that? And so I've taken it off the shelf, and I, started flicking through, and then I borrowed the books and I started reading them, and it just really, really appealed. And from there sort of started playing with ideas, just testing bits and pieces, but I wasn't overly serious about it. Life happens. I was in my early 20s. Lots of other things was going on. And then over time, just things evolved. I came into a situation where had a bit of land. I was a full-time stay-at-home dad with the kids for a number of years, and on this bit of land as well. So while I was looking after them, I was also, working on the landscape, and it gave me time to test and play and see what worked and what didn't. And, just because it says this in theory doesn't mean it's practical for my particular landscape. And there was just lots of learning with regards to that. And it just sort of took off from there in a nutshell.
Great stuff. So why don't we just jump the way? And so you read the book, you got your land. What were the sort of first thing? Did you have your PDC at this time? Have you done your first one?
No.
So what are you playing with? What are you trying out?
I would read lots of bits and pieces, and in the books, and it's like, oh, what is a swale? So I'd go dig something, and I'd see what had happened with regards to the water, and looking at terracing and trenching, and different forms of composting, and it all just started with a lot of garden stuff. That was sort of the inroad from there. And then when the internet became sort of a bit of a thing, the world opened up with a lot more information. So I started, following the likes of Milkwood and Jeff Launton and all these other people as well, and started to get more information and play with different ideas. And I remember Milkwood posted something with regards to a Zuni bowl, and I'm like, what the hell is a Zuni bowl? So I started playing with that. And my kids were quite small at the time, and they came out and they helped me build it. And it was quite a fun time playing in the mud and getting all that stuff done. And then it wasn't until the stars didn't align for me to do a course until much later. There was a situation. I was working in primary schools. I was teaching sustainability in primary schools, and this opportunity arose where there was this month where there was a series of courses that I wanted to do, and they were all one after the other. So I organized to have time away. So I went away for the month, and I did all these courses on this site that was with Milkwood originally, Milkwood Permaculture. And I did market gardening, and I did the PDC, and I woofed on the site for a while, while in between the different courses, and had lots of conversations. And that sort of really was my formal introduction into permaculture. Even though I'd been reading about it for many, many years, it was interesting because I did the PDC, and I walked out and went, I knew nothing. What the hell was that? I was just like, I thought, oh yeah, I've got a handle on this sort of stuff because I've read a lot of books and I've tried lots of things. And the PDC just opened my mind. It blew me away, and it opened up so many new doors. And that was it. It sort of launched from there. It was actually the very next day I got home from my PDC. I got a phone call, and from someone I'd known years ago, and they said, "Oh, we hear you've just done a PDC, a permaculture design course. Do you consult?" And I'm like, "I just got home yesterday. Okay." And sort of jumped off that cliff, and I contacted Nick and sort of said, "What do I do? What's going on?" So he talked me through the process and understood, value your time, and take your time with it, don't rush it, and all the sort of advice that he could think of, and that I would take on board at the time. And did the consult, and that led to a second one, word of mouth, and then that led to a third one, and then that led to, and it just started to build from there. So I wasn't actively seeking a business; it kind of just evolved.
So, see, for that first job, how did you balance your sort of lack of professional experience with the fact that you had all this education in the PDC? So there's a sort of like, you are qualified to do the consultancy, but then there's that doubt, what if I'm wrong? How did you balance that? You said you had Nick, so
I Nick Ritter, so I contacted him, and he helped me and sort of helped guide through. But honestly, I was scared out of my brain. That's while I had the knowledge, I didn't have the practical experience with regards to it. So I kept it simple, KIS, keep it simple. I still use that principle today when I'm starting out on a site. Keep it simple, and then allow it to evolve over time, and really listen to the clients. I was heavily influenced by the likes of Dave Jackie and his work with Edible Forest Gardens, going into goal articulation and really diving into that social side of things before you go into the ecological, so you can marry the land to the client, rather than just sort of forcing your will on a landscape, which can happen, which I've seen over a couple of years. But yeah, and then from there, just sort of trusted it. And then when I presented it, it was like, well, here you go, here's the design. And they went, actually, that's really cool. We like that. And that's when they recommended me to someone else, and it just kind of started. Yeah. As time went on, I got more experience. I got different sized blocks, some schools, some after school daycares, some kindies. I also I'm employed by the University of Queensland currently as well, have been for the last 4 years, to do little bits and pieces as well, which is actually really cool. It's been an amazing journey. It's been full on, but it's been an amazing journey.
Class. Yeah, because that's I was lucky enough. I got work with a company when I done my PDC, but for me, if them leads aren't coming to me, so I'm relying on somebody else to get me the leads, or I was to start anyway.
Yep.
It's always a struggle. Yeah.
Mm.
So
You got to.
that was that wasn't, was that the days of YouTube that you could just video your site and show it to people? That was just word of mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just word of mouth. And like, I didn't even have a Facebook page or a web page or something for probably the first 2 years of the business, because it was just word of mouth. And then someone said to me, "Oh, Michael, you got to get the word out there. You got to have Facebook." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, all right, I get Facebook." And so I got a Facebook page, and then someone said, "Oh, but have you got a web page?" I went, "No." "Oh, you got to have a web page." "All right." So I got a web page, and it's just like, this is what, early, I don't know what, 2015 or so, 2015, 2016. And yeah, and then that's when it started to reach a larger audience, with regards to, and then evolved with, working with club, but also education. Education became a big part of it as well. And where I was living at the time, there wasn't there wasn't a lot of people who would come to do the education, because we don't go for that far on our holiday. So it was sort of like, well, we're sitting around a fire with some friends one day, and we were having a bit of a complaint about it, and then one of them said, "Michael, put up or shut up." And so it was like, okay, all right. So I started running some courses, and then things slowly evolved on the education side. So I was doing the consult work, and then I found that really informed my educational side of it as well. I could speak from the practical experience rather than just what the textbook said. And I found that more often than not, some of the stuff in the textbook didn't apply to a lot of the clients that I was working with, because the climate was different, or their context was different. And that got me to play with the various tools and techniques. And then that tied back into the education, when people come to learn, and I could talk about that. And then talk about how it can be applied, and it just kind of, that side of the business grew.
So you're a consultant and you're teaching, and you're still educating yourself as well with all the different PDCs.
I haven't. Well, yes, I have slowed down that a lot, because it's just time. Unfortunately, I got very, very ill last year. I've just sort of been given the go ahead that we could be going into a good space soon, which is like really awesome. It's taken a lot of work, a lot of hard work. So the education has died down this year, but normally, it's not necessarily PDCs, because there's lots of courses. I'll go do gardening courses as well, and I'll do, I've done, multiple gardening courses and beekeeping courses. I'm just seeing what people are doing, how they're doing it. I'm not really stuck on one particular tool or technique. If someone comes along with something better, I'll go, "Oh, that's great. I'll start using that instead." And I'll put that tool down, and I'll pick the next tool up. And that's been really interesting, seeing other people's perspectives, ideas, and then bringing it together.
Great stuff. So let's go back to the start. We're on about, you did 14 PDCs. So taking up a variety of courses. I'll not deep dive. What was your thought on the 14 haven't seen? I take it it's pick what suits yourself, or how would you evaluate doing the 14? What worked and what didn't?
Oh, listen, I don't, the first one blew me away, but it's like, and as it goes on, like, there is a certain pattern to a PDC. So there are certain similar themes in a lot of the classes. So you sort of come into that rhythm, but everyone has got a different opinion with regards to the way it's applied, or a different way of looking at it. And so the extra stuff that I did wasn't so much about just, this wasn't about getting the certificate at all. It was about getting that opinion and idea, and how they applied certain tools. And some of them had completely different ways of looking at it, which was like, oh, okay, I hadn't thought of that before. And then I'll start, thinking with it, and then playing with it with my clients on the landscape, to test that idea to see if it would go. And that would actually help alter my opinion, my ideas, help me being creative in that. So yeah, that's what it was mainly about. Not so much about, like I said, there's a certain pattern to a lot of PDCs. And they're taught in a very similar format, but it's really the detail. So the patterns to detail approach, the detail in each of the courses can be very different.
Yeah. So my PDC was online.
Oh yeah.
It basically, same as yourself, young family. I couldn't go for a 2-week residential, or I couldn't do the 6 weekends or whatever it was. So I do want to do another PDC, but I wanted to do it an in-person one. And that's I probably will never get around to doing that, because I get in the 2 weeks. But what would you advise me for that second PDC?
Listen, like I said, the very original teachers I had, they recommended doing at least 3, and there's so many different options out there now. So, I've done the 2-week intensive, I've done an extended one over several months, and I've also done online. So they're all taught very differently, and of course the ones in person, there's a lot more hands-on. Even though a PDC is roughly 75% theory anyway, you've got that hands-on, and also you can ask those questions direct and see it on site, so you can get the visual stuff as well, rather than just what it might be from a video. Or they all have merit, but it just gives, like I said, a different perspective, a different idea. And I found, for me personally, having those one-on-one conversations with my teachers, and it wasn't during class, it was during lunch or at dinner. We'd learnt the stuff during the day, and then having those conversations, which really solidified that learning, which was even more valuable, I found, than the classes themselves, because we got to bounce ideas back and forth. And it wasn't just myself and the teachers, it was the other participants as well. And so we'd be having these extended conversations, sometimes well into the night, sometimes far too late than what we should have been. But that's where a lot of the learning cemented, and we got some extra creative ideas for design work, or marrying 2 different tools together, and hey, how would that look? And just sort of, went from there.
Great. And the teacher training, you did that as well. What was that like?
Yeah, it was good. Intensive. The first one I did was with Rosemary Morrow, and it was incredible. It was over 7 days, down in Otford. It was just so full on. I mean, it was just pressure from start to finish. But it really taught us to think and think on our feet, because when you're teaching, anything can happen, and you've got to be able to react and be able to adjust to it. So there was a lot of pressure, but I really appreciated that, because it helped me evolve as a teacher. It gave a lot of different ways of being able to present, rather than just looking at one particular way. It challenged us in trying new ideas to present information. And, sometimes you might be in an area like, the standard PowerPoint sort of thing, but you might be somewhere where the power's down. Or so you've got to find and think creatively of being able to use what you've got with you to be able to teach a session, whether it be on soil or gardening or designing your life, or whatever happens to be, whichever particular subject, or even the design process, without having all those extra technological tools, which really brings it back to its core. So you're just finding out what is right for it. I found once, I was the adult education coordinator at Northern Street City Farm for many years as well. And there was once where one of the teachers, well, the guest teachers who were supposed to come in for a completely different course, I was just facilitating, I was just hosting. And one of the teachers didn't show up. And so these participants were sitting there. So I ended up stepping into the role, because I couldn't leave these people sit there. Had no idea on the subject, but the lessons that I learned enabled to create a very co-creative space with the students or the participants, and together collectively over the course of the 3 hours, we got to the end, and we got to somewhere where everyone was happy. So the stuff that I learned on the teacher trainer, so it wasn't just with Ro, I've done 4. Those have given me the skills to be able to do that. Where beforehand, like I still am an introvert. But
you wouldn't think it.
Yeah, absolutely. But permaculture,
some energy.
Yeah, permaculture has given me my voice, if you know what I mean. It's like beforehand, I'd talk, but I have a very close group of friends, and that's sort of it. And I wouldn't, I wasn't overly out there too much. But this permaculture has actually, given me the voice. I mean, don't get me wrong. At the end of the day, I've got to come home and hide my blanket fort for a little while while I recharge my batteries. But it's actually given me my voice, so I can be an introvert and still be able to, do this stuff with passion in a career that I love.
Yeah, I think that is a misconception that introverts don't like talking or don't like being in.
It's just where we get our energy from. So we go out there, and then afterwards we've got to go recharge somewhere.
Yeah. So I take it teaching as well affects. How do you apply that then to your clients? So there is, because when I started working, it was here's your blueprint, away you go, thanks very much. But now, as I'm getting more experienced and realizing, well, that's not enough. You have to teach them, and you have to be there for them. Yeah. So how did your teacher training affect that relationship with your clients?
Yeah, well, that's where it was for me too. Was I did the really early ones was doing a design, handing it over, and I come to realize early on it was like handing over a loaded gun. They didn't know, to someone who didn't know how to use it. So they could look at it and go, we'll put garden's bed there, but it's all about connections and how the systems are working as a whole, and rather than just this is a garden bed and this is a compost pile and this is whatever. And so very quickly I started to I started educating clients as well. And then the teacher trainer gave me tools to be able to articulate the idea to people in different ways. And I find now, like, the most popular consulting process I have with clients is over 3 years. I'm working with them for 3 years, which is just incredible. And while there is design work in that, there's a lot of education that goes with that as well. So there's hands-on, one-on-one. There is they help co-create the space with regards. We use the design process. I'm a big fan of Dan Palmer's work with regards to making permaculture stronger. He was a good friend and mentor for a long time before he unfortunately passed beyond the veil. And I still use his living design process to help guide that, and running the participants, or not the participants, the clients through that. And there's education as well as the design work, as well as there's a lot of paperwork involved, choosing species, doing the research behind the species, that sort of stuff. But working with them over 3 years means that at the end of it, they have the full package. They don't need to call me back because they've already got it. You know what I mean? I'm designing myself out of the equation, which is not a particularly good business model, because it's sort of like there's no real idea for repeat business here. So, but I mean, that's kind of the point. They take ownership of it, and at the end of it, then it's not me help guiding them; it's them telling me what they're doing. And it's like, that is awesome. You have taken ownership of it. You're driving the design, and you understand that it's a constant evolution of process. It's not just start, finish, and you're done. And I still go visit old clients from time to time just to see how they're doing and how the systems are doing. And it's just awesome to see where these people have taken it once sort of we've finished that process.
Great stuff. So for us, we've created, have you ever heard of School?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
So we're on School. So it's basically sort of somewhere around trying to get people to learn. So listeners to the podcast can go. There's an introduction to permaculture course over there. It's very basic. It's just basically an introduction to permaculture gardening, and it's for, I think, for designers and design people who are designing for people, if they wanted a place like a community. That basically, I think everyone in permaculture should have one of these communities where they just send their clients over there. But
okay,
that's ours, and a wee plug for ours.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So, and you'll find access to some backstage questions on certain guests and stuff. So it's where our community, basically the podcast community, lives. If anybody wants to go over there, that'll be great. But even at that, I think it's a great platform, even for, it's like a customer management. So instead of you just doing a design, handing it over, you send your client there and they can go through all your courses. You can unlock certain tiers depending on what they've bought and what they so if they bought a design for you, you can say, well, here, join this club and you'll get free access. And then
free access. Yeah, no, absolutely. I did have an idea of doing something similar, but I just found like people like the hands-on one-on-one.
Yeah.
In person, so they, and it's the same with the workshops. I've taught stuff online. And I've given presentations online, but the interaction, I get better responses and sort of better numbers from the in-person rather than the online stuff. And because they want to ask those questions, they want to get their hands in the soil. They want to, really dive into it rather than just watching it on a screen, which, I mean, it makes for life very busy. I probably work sometimes, I have been up until recently, 7 days a week, because there's just been so much on, consulting during the week and then teaching on weekends, because that's when people are available. So that's when you hold the courses. I just finished running my PDC yesterday. So the PDC students had their presentation for their designs, and it was awesome. It was fabulous. It was awesome to see where they'd gone with it. And then the day before, I was actually up at another place, and we were doing the mid and understories of a food forest. So it's constantly eclectic and different. Every day is different. I can't say it's boring, because different site, different people, different clients, different context every day. Yeah.
So, running a good workshop. Any advice on how do you run a good workshop?
Listen, when you work it out, let me know. All right. I don't know. I've just found, I'm speaking from experience. I don't just run a workshop, and I show people how to use this stuff hands on. And it really then depends on the type of workshop that you want to run. Some of it is very heady, and there are some workshops that I've run over, anywhere between 3 and 6 days, that it is all theory, because we're diving deep into that. Where other things have been, like some of the gardening stuff, or whether food forestry, or even just soils, it's very, very hands-on. People can learn how to do this and how to test their soils and what to look for and all that sort of stuff. And rather than just talking about it, getting them to do it, so that we can take that knowledge home. So just be, for me, I found just being authentic, just be who I am, and just come with that experience. I don't teach something that I haven't played with.
Yeah.
That there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very important. So you mentioned experience there with qualifications. I'm of the opinion that if you've got the qualifications, you've got the experience. Say composting, I can go and teach about composting. Shouldn't be any problem with that. But for me to teach a full PDC, I'm still starting out, so I wouldn't have the full range. So I wouldn't say that I'm ready to do that yet. Or I couldn't teach about swales because I've never dug one. What's your thoughts on teaching permaculture? Because Jeff and Bull says you're once you get your PDC, you're ready to teach.
Yeah,
and then ours here, particularly in the UK, would gatekeep it and say, no, you need a teacher training before you're even considered. You need 2 years experience.
Yeah, listen, I can see both sides of the argument. The whole idea of each one teach one, because teaching actually also solidifies a greater learning experience for the individual who's teaching, so they get more epiphanies and ideas and concepts with regards to it. But I also understand, I am a little bit of a fan of the UK model, I've got to admit, that, rather than just diving into it, it's like, well, no, you've got a bit of paper, that's great, but you can actually cause a lot of damage with that bit of paper if you're not careful. Because the difference between the theory and the practice can be very, very different. For a while there, a number of years ago, probably roughly anywhere from half to a third of my work wasn't me going in for new stuff. It was me going in to work with people who'd had someone else to go in, and they were having issues. And so they got me in to give a second opinion and sort of tweak the system a little bit. And that there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's about working with each other. But I think each one teach one is fine, but start small. Start with the smaller stuff. If you want to teach on a PDC, even going to volunteer on someone else's PDC, just even if it's just sitting in the back of the room, because you're not there as a student, you're there to observe how it's being taught and learning the tools and helping out and volunteering. That's giving you a very different space to go in. Like I said, I've just finished my the PDC yesterday. I was running it 1 day a week over 16 weeks. So it was all up, including all the online content. It was something like 200 or 210 hours worth. And, people can't think that, you just get up there and you talk and you're just like, well, actually the month's worth of preparation work that went into that in the beginning. And then all the bits and pieces in between, as well as holding space for the students, the participants in that as well, to continue the learning, to make sure that at least they're getting, they're hitting the learning outcomes that you've set up inside that classroom. And then, of course, when it's over, you've got to decompact as well. So rather, I think there's a lot more to it than just each one teach one. But, start small and build up.
Yeah, I like that. And I think when you're ready for a PDC to teach one, somebody will ask you to teach.
Yeah, listen, absolutely. Yeah.
And my only objection is the arbitrary number. Like you have the 2 years. And it's like, okay. I could sit in my hands for 2 years and do nothing.
Well, I think it was maybe 4 years before I was invited to come in and teach a session on a PDC initially, and then I was sort of bounced around and I was teaching on a couple of different PDCs, which gave me different ideas because everyone did it slightly differently, and I was looking at it from the back end, not from the front end, which was really, really eye-opening. And then launching into sort of leading PDCs from there. So it was a slow build up. But listen, I'm very grateful that I had 4 years of practical experience as well as teaching a lot of smaller courses. I taught introduction to permacultures. I taught, soils and some food forestry or holistic orchards and a whole range of different subjects. But it was only shorter courses. And once I got my head around those, and then it slowly increased over time. That way, it built my capacity. Right? Like, if you've never exercised and then you go outside and you run full pelt and you could end up having a heart attack and die. But that in an extreme case. But if you slowly build up to it, you're building up your resilience, you're building up your health, you're building up your capacity as things improve, and you slowly get faster and faster. I see learning. I mean, everyone's different. Everyone sees it differently. For me, that was the model that worked because I was able to get hold of concepts before I could actually start teaching them. Some of the things, like some of the math in around, like around water and a few other, different subjects, it took me ages to get a grasp on it. And I know there are programs out there now that you can do it for you, but I need to understand the why. So that's my way of doing it. And so I start with the math and then work through. And then once I've got that, and then I start playing with the technology because I understand what it's trying to do. That was a big thing. And I wasn't going to start talking about or trying to teach them stuff until I understood it myself.
No, I think it's a great approach. So the world's changing, and I think your PDC students, do you notice as the years go on, the PDC students, their projects changing or anything, the level of student changing? Do you know anything changing about the PDC students?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been massive changes, actually, especially since COVID. There's I think more of a hunger for some of it, some of the information, especially with regards to when you're talking about the social permaculture or the inner landscape stuff. A lot of people, there's a lot of stuff out there about gardening and different gardening styles. And, one of my teachers said really, really early on, there's no such thing as a permaculture garden. It's a garden in a permaculture system. It's how does that garden fit within that system? And that sort of, it opens up so many different possibilities of what you can do rather than looking at a one size fits all model. But I found like people would go do gardening courses, and when they come into the PDCs now, or what I've noticed is they're already coming in with some experience with regards to that. Where previously it might be people who generally who've never had any experience with any of it, and they're coming in originally thinking that it was a gardening course, and then after a few weeks going, hang on, this is not gardening. It's getting into the deeper side of it as well. It's like, yes, we do gardening, but we do this and we do that and we do that, and sort of if you want to look at it from David Holgram's sort of 7 petals on his flower. The tools and technology, built fields, but most of it is climate of the mind stuff. So you got your finance and economics, you've got community governance, you've got health and spiritual well-being, all the climate of the mind stuff that helps drive the other things, and that tends to be a bit of an eye-opener for a lot of people. And I'm finding these days, lately anyway, in the last probably 2 years, more people are focusing on that side of it rather than, like, the gardening's nice, learning all that with regards to landscape stuff is nice, but it's the inner landscape stuff that seems to be more appealing to some of them.
I think it's more universal. Like, so for me to learn gardening, it's my gardening for my context, for my, as you say, it's my, what time do I have? But I think the other stuff is, I think, more universal, and the social permaculture and how we interact with each other. And I think people are, the way the world's going, people just want a bit more. I think they're fed up of a system that's only one way.
Well,
absolutely. You just feed into it. You're not actually getting anything back from it.
And there's so much information online now. So, I mean, if you really knew what you were looking for, you could actually piece together your own PDC off all the people's different YouTube channels and all sorts of other stuff as well. There's so much information out there that people soak up. And then, it's really, as actually one of the students, one of the participants of the course that we just finished actually said to me, he said, Michael, I knew a lot of that, but I didn't have the framework to put it together. And the course gave him the framework to put it together so we can start applying it. Because, there's read lots of books, watched lots of YouTube, but it was the framework that was missing. and that the course gave him that framework to be able to do that. And I thought that was really cool. That even after someone who's done so much could still actually learn something pretty significant from the course.
Great stuff. So your own property, Michael, what kind of gardening? We're going to move to gardening. What kind of things are you gardening on? Are you perennial systems, food forests?
I'm actually in a rental these days, so it's a little bit difficult. I left the property, sold up the property 5 years ago, I think it was, or something along those lines, and moved back in. Like I'm now living in Ipswich in southeast Queensland. My kids were going to school there. It was a 3-hour round trip. The reason I chose Ipswich was because the kids were going to school in Ipswich, and it was a 3-hour round trip every day to go to school from where I was living. And it's just not fair to them. So I moved in and went from 3 hours to 10 minutes, which is just, such a massive difference for their life anyway. And it was closer to their friends and other things as well. I spent a lot of my time, while I originally on the last property, I spent a lot of time, and I was given permission to be able to set in lots of systems, and I had lots of garden beds, and I started having trees and pots, and because I had to move it. I have to leave the property in the same condition I find it because it's being a rental. But what I found was ultimately the landlord was selling that property, and so I had to move it. And when I had some great help from friends and family that came and helped me move the stuff, but moving the inside of the house took 2 hours, and the outside of the house took 9 hours. And it's like, it's unsustainable. So I had to seriously think about it. And what I've done is, or what I'm doing now is, I'm actually working with the local community center. They've got some dreams and ideas and visions, and so I work for them. And I've donated a lot of my own infrastructure to go down there. And so even doesn't matter where I move to or what happens, that stuff will be constantly there and growing and moving. And so I've moved from doing it from an individual perspective. And I mean, I was doing it quite successfully. I mean, the last property I was an owner of, it was a half-acre block, but I had quarter-acre under production, and I was pulling over 3 ton of produce on a quarter-acre block. It's just massive, and it got to the point where it was almost self-perpetuating. It had just almost crossed that line when I left it. So these days I'm focusing more on the community side of things, and so talking to people about how we can re-inhabit our neighborhoods, because there's so much land that's just not being used. There was a consult I did a couple of years ago for a small town sort of further out west, and they wanted to get a bit more food security for where they're at. And the suggestion what I suggested to them in the long run is, rather than having this, big community garden or community farm or whatever, was, there was something like 4,000 houses in this town. And it's like, well, if every house had one fruit tree planted out the front of it, and it was the responsibility of that house to make sure that a tree thrived. So, and even when you're looking at water, saving your dishwashing, washing up water and then tipping it out on the tree every night, which would give it enough to thrive, that sort of thing. It would be, one of the biggest food forests you ever bloody seen. It's rather than having it all concentrated, how can we make it doable for everybody? And the other side of it is, because it was getting very, very hot, having trees on the landscape would lower the urban heat, and there's all sorts of benefits with regards to mental health and crime and stuff when you start doing that sort of thing. But something as simple as looking at planting a tree on, out the front of every house. And that got me thinking, when I came back to here, where I currently am now, how to work more with the community to make those sort of systems happen. That's going to, for me, that I believe anyway, that's going to create more resilience rather than trying to do it all yourself with that self-sufficient attitude, because it's not just you, it's everyone. There's a lot of crop swaps that happen around here. So people come together to swap produce, and I've gone to a few of these, and everyone's growing tomatoes and zucchinis and silver beet and all sorts of other stuff as well. And so when everyone goes to a crop swap, guess what they've got? Everyone's got tomatoes, and everyone's got silver beet, and everyone's got zucchinis, and everyone's got, it's like, every now and then there might be a bit of diversity, but ultimately everyone's growing the same thing. And I say to a lot of my students when we go through do the gardening stuff, I said, we'll have 20 people in a room, and I'll say, right, well, if there's 20 people in this room, if everyone grew 5 different things and then came together, rather than trying to grow it all, everyone grew 5 different things and you came together, there would always be something to swap. It would create community. So you're bringing social into it. You're reducing your workload. And that's, 20 people, 5 things. That's 100 different vegetables or 100 different fruits or 100, you know what I mean? It's massive. And that's really bringing out. And if someone's fails because of whatever reason, there was a flood, there was a fire, pests got into it, whatever. Okay, out of 20, 1 failed, but you still got 19. So the load is being shared by so many different people. And I think that when you're looking at, we're going to look at the cost of living crisis at the minute. We're looking at low energy futures. We're looking at, the retrofitting the suburbs, re-inhabiting our neighborhoods. I think, inviting that agricultural, the urban agriculture into the space so we can actually start, reducing our food miles into that as well, but creating wildlife corridors. The verge is a big thing, using the verge outside the front of your house. There's a bit of a push around here in a lot of places actually about using it to grow food. But I think, what if we turn our verges into habitat, wildlife corridors? And, so we invite the wildlife to come in through the city, through those spaces, which is actually going to add so much more diversity, increasing resilience as far as beneficial insects and soil building and a whole range of other stuff. So it's big picture stuff, but starting on for me, just working on the local suburb that I'm in, working with the local community center to make that happen. And if we can do that, if we can make it happen, then people can see what's going on and just replicate.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the idea.
No, it's definitely something. I'm still at the stage where this year now I should have my own place sorted, a full system. And I had different systems all over the years. I've been gardening over 10, 12 years maybe. And I had like different things. So I had the chicken coop, I had the hares, but now I was going to move house. So I sort of took everything out, and now we're not moving house. So I'm able to I've done a design. I'm able to implement the system. So once I get my own system, then I think that's the next stage is reaching out and trying to get them things done. And I like that. So I'm trying to, now it's like I let my grass grow. And it's simple things like, here we have a problem at the end now, October, November, people do what's called the final cut in their grass because it stops growing. They cut it down really short. So then what happens is then come March, when they're ready to grow again, there's a layer of moss and everything because there was no grass there to keep the moss out.
Yeah.
So of course the moss thrives. So in March, everybody's there with their scourers and their chemicals, scouring all this moss off and then putting chemicals so the grass can grow again. Well, my grass gets left long. I have a sort of small food forest out there at the minute. So I'm trying to buck the trend a wee bit but the fruit then that's on my trees, people comment, then I get comments, wow, look at the many apples you have, and then I hand them out. And a guy knocked the door a few weeks ago looking for pears. So it's great. That's like, so after I'm happy with that, then I'm thinking of reaching out like that and just saying, right, getting people together. Where would you start there, just to take it friends and family?
Yeah, listen, absolutely. Start at home, and then friends and family coming over just to see. And there's something really, really fulfilling about having people come over, and you might cook a meal or you might have something there, but it's all come from your garden. That really sparks a lot of conversation. And I was there. I did that. Like I said, I was pulling over 3 ton on a 1/4 acre block, and it was just awesome. My kids thought I was absolutely nuts. And it was actually during the first lot of COVID lockdowns. And they went, well, maybe Dad has some idea about what he's talking about, because we had lots of food and we didn't have to worry about going anywhere and all of that, where, some of the, I don't know what it was like over in Ireland, but, some of the mad rush that was happening in the supermarkets around here at the time was just crazy with regards to food and specifically toilet paper for some reason. Like I still don't understand that. But we didn't have to worry about it.
I was lucky enough. I'm tuned in enough. I was 2 weeks ahead of everybody. So I was well stocked by the time it came. But then the only benefit to me from doing that was to avoid the supermarket rushes, because then everybody was at the supermarket at the one time. But after a few weeks, it settled down. But I like the idea of community resilience, because what does they say in an apocalypse? If it's no good you being the only one with food, because the people are going to come take it.
That's right.
And
where are they going to go? They know exactly where they're going to go. Yeah.
Yeah, and it'll not be your neighbor; it'll be the government, and they'll call me guns, and they'll say, "Well, we have to take this now because we're in charge of redistributing food." So, so you have to. But if they come to a neighborhood and everybody's got food, well, it's like now you've got a neighborhood full of people who've got each other's backs and are saying, "Oh, well, we've done this together, so we don't need nobody's going to steal."
Yeah, yeah. What the idea of and something. One of my mantras is 1 tree a week is 52 trees at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And rather than trying to plant it out all at once, if you do 1 tree a week, and after 3 years you've got 156 trees out there, and you look out the window and go, when the bloody hell did that happen? It doesn't feel like a lot because you're just doing 1 a week.
Yeah, and then the tree becomes what do you call it? The first drug when they give somebody so you get a tree growing, and then all of a sudden they're growing stuff under it. They're growing herbs, and then they're going, oh, what else can I grow?
Yeah, that's right.
That fruit's delicious, and then before they know it, that expands out again.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because it's changing the landscape, and like I said, 1 a week, or if you're doing an annual garden bed of some sort, 1 square meter a week is still 52 square meters at the end of the year, and it's not about if you tried to do 52 straight up, then that's a lot of work. It's a lot of weeding, it's a lot of watering, it's a lot of planting. But if you do 1 a week, it's actually you grow with the system rather than trying to do it all at once. Slow, the idea of small and slow solutions, and that also gives the opportunity for change, because things will evolve, ideas will evolve, and if you put it in all at once, and then 6 months later you might go, I wish I didn't put that there. I wish I pushed it over there. But you've spent so much time, effort, and energy in putting it in over there. It's sort of you're reluctant to move it. But if you slowly add things over, you'll identify. You identify before you get to that point. Like, actually, I'm not putting it over there. I am putting it over there, and that's where the energy goes. So it's a bit more efficient, produce no waste. You're a bit more efficient with regards to time and energy as well.
Yeah. Michael, finally, if somebody wants to do this as a career, so they get their PDC, they have a wee bit of experience. Any advice for someone wanting to consult professionally?
Listen, my first instinct is don't. Listen, it's understanding what's involved. Like, there's lots of different ways of being able to do that. And you watch that sort of little YouTube thing I did on the business of permaculture. There's lots of different ways you can do it. But I'm full-time. This is my career. So, I've got to treat it as such. And so, I'm working, you can just be aware of what's involved. I'm working at least 6 days a week. Sometimes some days is really long days because, like tomorrow morning, like I'm going out and I'm starting to plant out a food forest with a client. But because of the heat at the minute, we're starting at some ridiculous hour in the morning. And I'm not saying it is really early, but we're trying to beat the heat, getting stuff in the ground before the day begins. And so you're working really odd hours. And it's a journey. So if you've got a family as well, be aware that with regards to whether it be partner or kids or parents or what it happens to be, because it can take you away sometimes as well. It's like, there are times when I might be gone I have been gone for a couple of weeks because there's a job or something pops up and I have to go do it, just to maintain an income to be able to survive. There's this whole push-pull, and that can have an effect on relationships with your kids, partners, and whatever else. So if you are going to if you want to have this a career, the first thing I would say is sit down and talk to your family about it, or those that are closest to you, about wanting to do this and talking about what is involved and is that okay. And then from there, decide which path you want to do. And so you might have a full-time job in a different world, and you do it as a part-time gig. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It gives you some experience. You're not having to worry about income, an income, loss potentially because of house, mortgages and life and all that sort of stuff as well. And it gets you to play with it, and that might be enough. You might get involved with local permaculture groups or community groups where you might be able to apply the tools and techniques that you've learned. You might decide that you want to have a hybrid model where you might have a farm and you're doing permaculture as well. And so there might be some farm work and education work as well as farm tours and all that sort of stuff. Or on the end scale, which is sort of, for some reason, that was the model I chose. I'm still sometimes wonder why, I jumped off that cliff And part of the like you with regards to the teacher trainers and the PDCs and the advanced courses and stuff, for me, that's professional development. If I want to advance in my career, I need to keep learning so I can add more value to the people who I'm educating and also my clients as well. So there's an expense with that. I was spending for a long time about, anywhere between $4,000 and $6,000 a year in education, just to keep up with a lot of the stuff and be able to provide that value. I haven't done it this year. There hasn't been a course that's really grabbed me at this point, but I'm sure there will be in the future. But yeah, if you want to do it, just be aware about continuous development, networking with your community as well, so you're not alone, and actually draw on that, and just be aware of what's involved and skill up. Yeah.
Great advice, Michael. And as well, if you want to find out the different careers, you can watch the podcast, previous episodes, and listen to what other people are doing as well.
Yep.
Any final thoughts, Michael, before we wrap it up here?
Listen, being in this space has been amazing. It has been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to be able to work with, environments and people and clients that I have, and it is very, very rewarding. And I really appreciate you reaching out and asking, to be able to talk about it, because you hear a lot of stuff, but there's also a lot of stuff behind the scenes that is tend to glossed over. I know for me that, even with the education, there was a lot of stuff that was talked about how to do it and whatever else, but there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff that wasn't. And it wasn't until I dived into it before I went, oh, hang on. And it's the same with the consult work. There's a lot of behind the scenes that is sort of not talked about. They don't talk about, being away for weeks on end, or all the prep work that's got to go into it, or whatever happens to be. And I think getting that knowledge out there, I think, is really, really important, because I think what we do is very, very important. And so, having people come into it, and the motto I have for my business is making it real. And, that's even with the education, it's not just about the fluff, it's making it real. And I think it's important that we all do that. And so, things like this, having these conversations, and everyone that it reaches, and if it resonates with them, then that's great. And then hopefully it'll help propel them on their journey into the space that they, into potentially what might be their chosen career.
That's great. And where can people find you?
I'm based here in Australia, so, but I have I won't say it's a good web page, because I haven't updated it for a while. I'm a one-man show, and there's only so many hours in the day. But it's saveasoilpermaculture.com. I've got a lot of free downloads and blogs and sort of stuff on there. But I also have a very limited, I have, like you, I have a little bit of a YouTube where I put up some bits and pieces as well. And Facebook. I've been using that ever since, like I said, originally it's like, you got to have a Facebook page. I don't have a Facebook page. And I put up a lot of information up on there, and Instagram as well. So that's probably the main ways of being able to find me and sort of see what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Great, Michael. For anybody listening, I'll provide those links in the description.
Awesome. Thanks, William.
That's great. And guys, remember as well, if you go over to our school for behind the scenes, for a few basic courses, more importantly, the community, see what people are doing, get involved with a conversation on a Friday night, for example. It'll be Saturday morning for those in Australia, where we just get together and chat and put the world to rights over a cup of tea or a beer, whatever your couple is. Michael, thank you very much. Guys, that's been the Permaculture Vine podcast, and that's been Michael Wardle, is it? Wardle. Wardle, aye. That's great. Thanks very much. Guys, we'll see you next week. Cheers.